What's up, gentlemen? The pigs are back for another episode of the Blind Pig Podcast, courtesy of BGObsession.com. Here for another quick discussion on a Wednesday evening. Rookies report for camp tomorrow, so feelings are high, things are getting excited. But before we do that, of course, if you've been here before, hook us up with a share. If you haven't been here before, give us a like and a follow. If you found us on YouTube, you can also, just so you know, you can catch us on all major audio platforms, as well as if you're listening to us on those platforms, you can catch us on YouTube if you want to watch and follow along. And absolutely, please feel free to come by BGObsession.com, mix it up, jump in the discussion, and have some fun. We always enjoy new members until they believe that Taylor Heineke is a Hall of Famer and other things. But I digress.
I think that's just one guy that just keeps coming back.
He just keeps coming back. Yeah. He's like a turd that won't flush. But we're not going to go there. Hopefully he doesn't. Well, maybe he does listen to the podcast.
With apologies to Taylor Heineke, who we really like.
Of course, we love Taylor.
Oh, yeah.
The tone of the conversation was relatively excessive. No, you know what? This year it'll be Sam Hartman to the Hall of Fame. So, speaking of Sam Hartman, I don't know that this is a big deal. And just a little bit of news that popped up today. He was drafted in the 9th round of the USFL draft this morning, which means if he does not make our final 53 or practice squad, he would then be the quarterback for the Birmingham team.
Something brothers.
Yeah, Birmingham something.
Stallions. I think they're the Stallions. But anyways, not a big deal, but I think, honestly, I think he might end up finding his way onto the 53. I think this might even further push it because now there's even more attention around him. And if they have any idea that they think this guy's going to be even a capable roster player, quarterback is so valuable. You might just have to hold on to him. And sorry, Driscoll. See you later, buddy. And run 3 quarterbacks this year.
I think Driscoll's out of here regardless.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's definitely the third best quarterback on the roster. It's just a matter of, I think what's going to come down to is what does Sam Hartman want? If I'm sure they would be willing to carry him on the practice squad, but is that the best thing that for him as far as he's a young guy, he's got talent, so he could go light it up in the other league and get an offer somewhere else in the NFL. But anyway, either way, I'm glad for him and he's sexy as hell. We know that much.
He's got some great hair.
The women love him.
They do.
How about the UFL having at least 9 rounds in their draft? Who knows how long their draft is?
Right.
I'm surprised they didn't draft Jaden Daniels. I don't know how that works. They're just like, we're drafting everybody.
Well, yeah. All right. So first, stop and think about it for a minute. There's 10 teams? How many teams are in that? It's not like there's a 30. We're talking about 32 player rounds here. So they're 9-round draft. Every team gets 9 players, but they're going through 120 players total. I don't know.
Have you guys wondered? I've wondered this before, which is why doesn't the NFL just make an official arrangement where it's like, this is our farm league, man. This is it's literally attached to the NFL as just a place where guys can.
They had it. NFL Europe, if I remember. When they did that, they literally had the patch of the team that they were on their jersey while they were playing in Europe. But granted, that was 25 years ago.
That's a whole different thing, man. The whole overseas. I just think in the U.S., why not have a farm league?
I agree.
Baseball has, right?
It makes sense to me. I would get with the USFL and turn it into almost what the G League is for the NBA. That you've got ability to send guys up and bring them down, and even if the teams aren't necessarily affiliated specifically with the team in the NFL, but have them be able to get reps. I guess the only concern that you would have there is, you would hope your guys wouldn't be sharing information in the locker room. Like a guy like Sam Hartman if he's in camp all year and then right before the season he gets sent down, he's got the knowledge of your playbook and but I mean that's conspiracy theory stuff there. I wish that they would do it because I'd love to see guys. How many more guys would make it in the NFL and be more effective?
To throw something out there, and I don't know how many people realize this. I mean, I think everybody knows that there's a tiered system in most world soccer, right? You've got a top league, a second league, a third league, etc. What I don't think most American fans realize is that those top leagues where all the money is made put a tremendous amount of money into the football associations that support the lower leagues. In England, the Premier League, which is probably the most wealthy league in the world, puts a ridiculous amount of money into the English Football Association that runs the Championship, League One, and League Two. And those serve as feeder leagues for the Premier League. And literally what happens is the Premier League loans players out to teams in those lower divisions to get, to use a football term, reps, right? We're loaning our young guys out to you so they can get time on a professional team. They can play week in and week out. I don't have to play them here. They're going to get their time. They're going to develop, and then I can bring them back next year in the off season and see whether or not they're ready to play in the Premier League now. And I think it would be a great idea if the NFL actually put money into the USFL. It's not like they don't have the money to do it.
Bob, even the MLS has adopted that. Most of the MLS teams have like junior teams that are playing the same, I mean, basically mirror seasons with the MLS team, and guys, once in a while, a guy will get bumped up, etc. And they also bump guys up to, international play.
Right.
Okay.
It's a different thing, right? It's like the whole universe of soccer versus just a league. And I think the NFL is too league centric. They need to expand a little bit more.
Yeah. To be completely fair about it, it's not like there's a college program for soccer in England to feed players in, right? Players join clubs at young ages and they go through club academies and the club puts them through school. And it's a very different sports model than football, basketball. Our sports model is all built around junior high, high school, college, and then into the pros, except maybe for baseball, where there's that big minor league system. I guess hockey's got something of a minor league system. I'm less familiar with hockey, but I hear about, I've got a minor league team right here in Allen, that a lot of my friends go see all the time, but it's it's a very different model. And so, I guess you could make arguments both ways, but yeah, I think it would be in the NFL's best interest to boost the USFL and keep it around. Guys get reps in the spring, and who knows who may develop.
So just to play devil's advocate here, and to your point, baseball has a large developmental league. Guys like rookie picks generally are in the minor leagues in Major League Baseball for 2 to 2.5 years before they get called up to the big club. In hockey, it's not as extensive, but there is still a minor league. Generally speaking, most draft picks don't make it into the NHL simply because the NHL is so competitive that there's just they're not going to be able to keep up.
Right.
But there it's usually a year and a half. Premier guys will get up faster, obviously. Like Alex Ovechkin, when he was drafted, did not spend a second in the minors. You know what I mean?
Right.
But in the same token, Bryce Harper, who was drafted by the Nationals, was in the minor leagues for almost a year and a half. Now, a lot of that has money situations, but the only thing I can think of with the NFL, the average NFL career is 3 years. You know what I mean? So maybe the concern there is a season in a feeder league is starting the clock on a guy that, you know what I mean? I don't know. I'm just speculating and spitballing.
Maybe,
It's
but
fair.
I think some of it's just arrogance. I think it's just more arrogance of like, we're the NFL and you either make the NFL or you don't. And I don't know.
I think there's a lot of that because you think about guys, how many Look at like Jeremy Reeves or a back quarter of the roster guy that never really gets a shot to be a real starter, and you wonder how many of those guys get lost.
Yeah,
And
there's Kurt Warner's out there,
right.
but how many Kurt Warner stories are there? They're very few and far between. So I just think, I mean, I don't think we need to beat it into the ground, but I just think the NFL is they're really the outlier in terms of sports leagues, in terms of not having any like intentional farm system and not just a farm system, because I think that implies it's just about the league itself, but to give guys opportunities that, not everyone's going to be drafted, and there are guys that are, there are Hall of Famers that were undrafted free agents, and how many of those guys never get the chance
Yeah,
to,
right.
to
Especially you got to think quarterbacks.
Yep.
Because we had debates on this very podcast about the fact that we were up in arms that speaking of Taylor Heineke didn't
Again.
get first
Right.
team reps until Carson Wentz went down.
Yeah.
Right. And even though he may not be an NFL starter, that guy had the talent to be given a chance at the NFL level, not just because we're at our wits end and he's sleeping on his sister's couch.
Right.
And if somebody gives us his phone number, I mean, he deserved
spent 2 years in a feeder league getting reps, playing 10 to 12 games.
He should have been at somebody's camp at some point.
Right.
Yeah.
So, speaking of camp, rookies report tomorrow.
There you go.
Rookies report tomorrow. So finally, we're kind of here. If you followed along with our podcast over the last few years, we kind of nerd out in the off seasons. I will say a lot of that is probably because the last couple of years the regular season hasn't given us nearly as much to
It's
get
like all we
excited
can
about.
be excited for.
Season. So, I am curious, guys. We discussed a couple topics what to talk about. The first one I'll throw out there is, and this is kind of to John's recommendation, is do you guys have any camp surprises? Guys that are going to show up in camp that really not many people are talking about that might play their way onto the roster?
So I don't know if I kind of took a broader, take on this, which is I wrote rookies, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. I really think we may have just had the best draft we've had in 20 years. I don't think that's a crazy thing to put out there. And I mean, obviously Jaden Daniels is a guy that we have huge amount of hype around and expectations for. But even looking beyond him, I think the rookies in training camp are going to blow people away. And I like Mike Saint Ristel. I think he is the guy to watch. I know he's like anointed as he's a slot corner, but I'm looking at Benjamin St. Juste, and then I'm like, who's our other corner? Like, who are our other corner starters? And I know a lot of people may say Forbes. I have a lot of skepticism about Forbes. I think Michael Davis, who's the Chargers free agent that we signed, he's probably the logical choice to be the second corner. But I'm not sure St. Ristel isn't the other corner. I mean, I know he's been the slot guy. That's where everyone has him pegged. But I just think he's so talented. He could really surprise some people. Ben Sinnott, the tight end from Kansas State. I think that kid has a ton of talent. Brandon Coleman, I think there's going to be a lot of eyeballs on as far as like being the left tackle, not Cornelius Lucas, not like easing him in, but flat out the left tackle. And then Luke McCaffrey. I mean, and then Jordan McGee, who's already getting a lot of press. He was like a fifth rounder linebacker from Temple. I just think this rookie class, and that's not even talking about the guys that are injured, like Newton.
Yeah.
I think this might be the best rookie class in literally in 20 years. And I think we're going to see it right out of the gate in training camp. That's what I got.
I kind of mentioned it earlier, and I'll wrap this into my next kind of thing. I think he's going to surprise, and I think he's going to be a camp darling. I think Sam Hartman's going to turn a lot of heads. I think he's going to get a lot of reps. I don't think Jaden Daniels is going to be playing too much, and we'll get into that a little later. I don't know that they even want Mariota on the field for a ton. So, a guy like Hartman could get 6 or 7 quarters. In the equivalent of almost.
Talking about in preseason or training camp?
Well, he's going to get a lot of reps in camp, yes, but I'm just talking about as the surprise in camp and then over the actual preseason and somebody who could really seriously play themselves onto this roster. He's a 7th round pick, but I think he ends up being a lot better than people are expecting. And another guy that I am genuinely kind of interested in is our 2 rookie running backs, Austin Jones and Michael Wiley. I'm curious if the 2 of them can press their way into our surprise some people in camp and press their way into the backfield. Because right now you got Robinson, you got Eckler, and then you got a bunch of question marks. We like Rodriguez, some of the things we like about Rodriguez. But beyond that, we picked up Jeremy McNichols. There's room for at least for 2 guys to prove themselves into being kind of a surprise and finding their way into meaningful minutes. And we all know running back, you can do it pretty quickly.
So before the other guys chime in on who's going to be the training camp surprises, as far as guys that really jump out at us, I just want to mention to me training camp darlings are guys that I'm sure we could throw out some examples, but the guys that have the great biceps or that
yeah, Robert McCune. And
yes, Robert McCune is the perfect guy.
Anthony Mix, those kind of dudes.
And
who is
Chris
the running
Doring.
back?
Yeah.
So we've got guys that all logic would say, John Keim would say, guys, they're not even going to make the squad.
Right.
But the fan base just goes ape shit over.
Yeah, how many Lake Seastrunk jerseys got sold? We got drafted.
Tua Craven. I mean, there's been so many of them over the years that oh yeah, this guy's gonna. So I just want to make that distinction. Well. I think let's start with the guys that are going to be training camp surprises. Yeah, wow, these guys
right,
really impressing, and then we can talk about the darlings.
The darlings, yep.
Who may or may not be, worthwhile or whatever. But anyway, what do you got, Bob?
Top of my list for surprises, and I don't know whether it's that much of a surprise at this point, but Jordan McGee, the guy was a 5th round draft pick, and at this point in time, just looking at the physique and the reports coming out of mini camps, I think the guy's actually got, I think everybody had him penciled in as special teams fodder, as a rookie. I think we're going to see him on the field. I think there's a pretty good chance he's going to surprise people in training camp, and we're going to see him as part of certain defensive packages at various and sundry points in time. Guys that probably don't get a lot of love and a lot of press. I'm kind of hoping Chris Paul is a training camp surprise. I think it's very possible that we know what we've got with Paul, but it's also possible that maybe Paul's been the victim of coaching and any number of other things the last 2 or 3 years. And that with legitimate coaching and a better unit around him and a more positive atmosphere, he may challenge for some time on the offensive as maybe starting guy at left guard. Now, do I really believe that's going to happen? I don't know that I believe that. I think they kind of have Allegretti penciled in for that position. But you listen to people out of Kansas City and they're like, yeah, Allegretti was great when he played, but he could never beat anybody to get a starting position on the line. And that ought to tell you something. So how great is he? Or is he just what fit the profile of what we needed? It's not like we gave him a long, contract. And I'm going to have more faith than you, John. I'm going to say Forbes is going to be a training camp surprise. I don't
in a positive way.
In a positive way. Yeah.
I think any I think Forbes surprising would be positive. I think
Yeah.
I don't think negative would be a surprise at this point.
I think he is, other than the fact that he lacks a certain size, right? And then that's something that's been, that's just going to plague him. Period. The end. I think the guy is a lot of what Quinn and Witt look for in a cornerback. I don't, and I could be completely wrong, but the kid's got a nose for the football.
I think he's the most controversial player on the roster because I think he could end up not on the roster.
I think he is. I don't disagree. He is absolutely the most controversial player on the roster, John. My question to you is, would he still be a controversial player on the roster if we'd taken him in the second or the third round?
I mean, I haven't seen evidence he can play at this level, but I don't know. I mean, I think the biggest thing, Bob, is, and like you said, you could be totally wrong. I feel exactly the same way coming from the other angle. I just don't know how much of it is coaching. And I think I said this a couple of pods ago, which is I'm just concerned about his confidence level. Like he had a terrible start and he just seemed to be like devastated in terms of confidence. And what I've seen is the good corners never lose confidence, even when they're terrible. They just believe in themselves, and we'll see. I mean, we're going to find out. And they obviously must see something in him because he's going into training camp. So,
and I've thought about that too. And to be completely fair and play devil's advocate with myself, he may be going into training camp because we spent a number 1 draft pick on him last year. And, but Dan Quinn wasn't shy about talking about him. And I don't think Quinn would have said some of the things he said for a guy that they don't think they can do something with. You speak differently, right? I think we've got the right coaching staff in place to rebuild this kid's confidence. And I think I trust and believe that these guys are actually going to figure out the best way to use each individual player they've got, as opposed to trying to fit square pegs into round holes and ignoring the obvious problem like the last coaching staff did. I'm sorry, nobody in their right mind leaves a kid out there to get torched time and time and time again the way they did with Forbes last year.
I totally agree with that.
It's the cornerback equivalent of what Spurrier did with Ramsey. He just left him out there completely unprotected to get hammered on play after play after play. And we then turned around and did exactly the same thing with Emmanuel Forbes last year.
And maybe his confidence isn't like shattered, Bob, if he has better coaching and they're like, instead of doing what you described, which is throwing him back out there over and over again. And maybe if they pull him in and like coach him up and groom him a little bit, maybe it's a totally different vibe right now.
Well, I think secondary is the biggest coaching swing of all for our team. So like last year, all our coaching wasn't great, but especially the secondary. You had that high school guy who was coaching the secondary. And now you go to Witt and Quinn, who like they're bread is buttered with the secondary. Like that's like what they know best of all things. So I think for all the players, that's the best thing possible for them.
And further to that point, what I was going to say was, look at the track record. How many successful corners have this coaching staff had versus how many successful corners had the previous coaching staff had? Quarterback's been a liability for the entirety of the 4 years that Ron Rivera was our head coach.
Almost as much as linebacker.
Right? Like, I mean, so then you start to then you look at that and you say, well, they didn't get anything out of anybody. Is it really the players or is there more to it? Again, playing devil's advocate. I personally, like I just mentioned it would be that that any positivity, like any surprise from Forbes would be positive. I don't think we got the most out of him. I don't think our secondary coaches got the most out of him. I think we can get more. And to Bob's point, yes, he was probably overdrafted, but does that mean he can't play football? He might never live up to the first round pick, but if he's good enough to be a fourth corner, he's still roster worthy because he's still the fourth best corner on your roster, at least in my opinion.
One last thought I'll throw in here. You know, nobody knew who Deron Bland was last year when when Diggs got hurt, right? Nobody knew who Bland was. Let me tell you who he was. He was a 5th round pick out of Fresno State in 2022. And all Witt and Quinn did was turn him into the current record holder for number of INTs returned for TDs in NFL history. Well, what can they do with a kid that's the college Division I all-time INT TD leader? What can they do with that kid? So that's kind of why I think he's going to be a big surprise. I'm kind of hoping that the coaching staff is looking at this kid and going, man, he was misused last year, and just chomping at the bit to get their hands on him and fix him and put him in a scheme that suits him. So it's a prayer, but
I don't think it's a prayer. I think it's a great point, Bob. And I mean, I don't think, even though we've criticized Rivera for like being stuck on him in the draft and drafting him, like, basically having the mindset of Emmanuel Forbes, period, when there were other guys maybe less risky right there that they could have taken. I think he's definitely was considered a first round talent. So, and you've said, Dallas had the guy in their sights reportedly. So
yeah,
I think he warrants, like, let's make sure either way, let's make sure we know what we have in this guy and give him every chance to be successful. So I totally hope you're right, man.
Well, and the other thing is
I'm not convinced you're not right. I just have a lot of questions about him.
The other thing, financially speaking, because he's entering his second year, they're not going to cut him. Because I think you have to then eat the entirety of his 4-year contract in that season, because that's the way that the rookie CBA is written to protect the guys, to keep them on the rosters. So I imagine he will at a minimum see 2024 in our uniform and potentially 2025, even if it means he's inactive. But I don't think they can release him because of the financial ramifications of doing so on a rookie deal.
Yeah, maybe so.
All right, guys. So
Tony?
then I guess. Oh,
Wait.
Tony, you got any camp surprises?
yeah. I'm going with a couple guys that were recently drafted, but I think will have a better opportunity now. I think Quan Martin. I think he's going to show out, especially in coordination with Sandstrom, because they're kind of similar. So, like, if Sandstrom does lock down the outside, you could put Quan in the slot. Quan could play safety spots too. I think they'll max out his talent, because I think he's still got a lot of talent, and he still flashed last year, even despite everything. And then I'm also going with Stromberg. I think.
Oh yeah.
I think he's still got talent. I mean, he in Arkansas, he was a good lineman, and he got hurt here and everything. So I think he can at least solidify himself as like our main backup interior guy, if given the shot. And if he proves himself here, I think he's got every opportunity.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you so much, my friend. Because I feel like I'm the only guy that's mentioned Ricky Stromberg like the last year, because, and again, in college, I mean, he's not a prototypical NFL interior lineman with some of the size stuff that and his arm length, for God's sake, or whatever they measure. But I just feel like he balled out in college, and he got, I mean, unfortunately, like it happens. I think Morgan Moses had that kind of thing where he got hurt early on and people were writing him off, and like Morgan Moses sucks. Well, Morgan Moses has been like a solid player for like the last 10 years.
Pretty much ever since you left us.
Yes.
He was a solid player here but the problem was every game he was limping off.
But you had people writing him off like the minute he got hurt early on. And I just think Stromberg, that kid has some game, and I love that.
Yeah, I mean, 'cause in the SEC, like they crank out NFL defensive linemen like every year, multiple teams, and
Mhm.
he held his own when he was in Arkansas. So I think he's got a shot.
So you see people writing people off for getting injured earlier in this. So you mean kind of like Fidarian Mathis?
Yeah, he's a forgotten.
Oh yeah,
He's a
everyone
forgotten.
forgets
That
about
guy,
him.
he could be somebody that we can. And hell, I'll go ahead and flip it now, John. We talked about it. We can switch over to Camp Darlings or their guys. I think Phil Mathis is a guy that could show up and be one of those guys. It's a Camp Darling where he's playing in the third and fourth quarter because he's not going to supplant Payne and Allen. Chances are Ridgeway is pretty confidently blocked and marked in. And he might start showing up and we might see some flashes against the third and fourth string interior offensive line. And people are going to say, wait a minute.
I would argue we may see Mathis flashing against first string guys because he could be starting games. If they don't play Allen and Payne too terribly much in preseason,
Right.
who's going to start on the interior line?
Oh, that's right.
Newton's still hurt. So they're not going to play Newton. I'm seeing Ridgeway and Mathis start as our starting tackles, in the early preseason. So,
I mean, you're not going to find me hating on it. John, who are your Camp Darlings? You got any?
I've got one that's kind of not probably what you're expecting because he's a vet. I think Austin Eckler is the most underrated guy on this team. He's just 2 seasons ago. Here were his stats. He had 107 catches. He's a running back, by the way, for those that have forgotten. He had 107 receptions out of 127 passes thrown his way. I don't know what percentage that is, but it's pretty fucking high. He had 722 yards of catches for 5 touchdowns. Oh, and then he added almost 1,000 yards, 13 touchdowns, 46 first down rushes, and a 4.5 yards per carry average. That was 2 years ago. I think Austin Eckler is the biggest offseason signing we had. And I think in a Cliff Kingsbury offense, he is going to eat. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I think he's going to really be a big, huge part of this offense. And that folks are undervaluing what he is and what he can bring to the table. And people talk about, oh, he's old. He's 29. I mean, he's in his prime. I hate to say it. I really believe he is. And he had a little bit of a down year last season, but I'm telling you, man, Austin Eckler, when people see what he can do, they're gonna be excited about it. So that's my guy.
Anybody else? Any darlings?
Or Darling, and one I got is F.A. Obata, just because he's in a position group where he's going to play a lot. There's opportunity too. There's no like standout defensive end, and we re-signed him for a reason. So I think in camp and in preseason he'll get a lot of opportunity, and I think he'll be one of those ones that the fans are. He's already pretty popular. He has got like a cult following, and I think he's one that'll stand out.
Here's a weird one for you, but I think this is the year we see Sam Cosmi step up and become the leader of that offensive line group. He was a little vocal at the end of the year and in the media more so than, some other guys. We let go of some age. We let go of some veteran leadership. Sam he's not the oldest guy left, obviously, because Cornelius Lucas is still around and Wiley, but he was drafted by us. He's never played anywhere else. And the guy played at nearly all pro levels next year. If he can take that thing to the next level, suddenly we've got a replacement for Scherf, maybe even equal in skill, but he seems a little more vocal, a little more invested in the Washington team than Scherf ever did. And so I think the guy takes a step forward and as the leader of a position group that's been glorified for many, many years in Washington, he has the opportunity to be something special to the fans if he can take that next step, right?
All right, I'm going to throw the random late back half of the roster wide receiver out there. Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint. He's already started with the one-handed grab in the mini camps that was floating around Twitter for a couple days. He did not test well. I believe his 40 time was like a 4.8 or something stupid. But he was one of the top receivers at Georgia, and I think he plays faster than he tests. So I think we could see this guy kind of show up a little bit, especially if he's playing second half of the roster competition. So I think he's gonna people. I wouldn't be shocked if midway through the preseason people aren't like, we need to give this guy more reps. We need to look at this guy. Could this guy be a sneaky addition to the 5th spot on the roster or 6th spot?
Here's another name for you that I meant to bring up a second ago, Kaz Allen. For many of the same reasons, right? He was a hot commodity with the fans last year. I'm not saying Allen makes the roster. I'm saying he becomes a darling with the fans in camp, and everybody's screaming their heads off to see more of Kaz Allen because he's lighting it up late in games. Kid's electric, but there you go. Yeah, sorry, Tony, I cut you off, man.
Oh no, you were good.
All right, well then I guess we can circle back. The next topic, I am curious, how much Jaden Daniels do you guys want to see? Joe Theismann came out like 10 days ago and was speculating that he would be okay with not seeing any Jaden Daniels. They don't want to risk it. Obviously, a lot of that's hyperbolic. But how much do you realistically want to see him on the field during preseason?
I think it's ironic that Joe Theismann, who was like volunteering to do punt returns,
to try to make
to get on the
roster.
fucking field, now he wants to wrap Jaden Daniels in, in bubble wrap. No, it ain't gonna happen. He's a rookie quarterback. They're gonna make him play. They may guard him a little bit in preseason games once they're sure he's like ready to go. But he's going to get a lot of snaps and a lot of time, and he probably should. And that's just the way it is. That's what I think.
So how much do you actually want to see him?
I want to see every bit of him I can up until I don't know how many preseason games we have anymore. I wish it was. I think preseason I want to see a quarter out of him.
A total quarter combined.
No, a quarter per game.
Okay.
I think we probably see somewhere between a quarter and a half out of him the first 2 games. And then the third game, I'm not sure he even dresses.
Yeah, I think the last game that's going to be the game, and none of the starters.
I could be okay. I'm okay with that.
But yeah, I could see like a quarter, or if he's like coming out on fire some game, you just give him a few series. And I guess this year we have like multiple close practices with other teams. The analysts or the beat guys always say that's what the coaches value the most.
Yeah, the joint practices.
Yeah, the joint practices.
Miami and the New York Jets, right? Yeah, Miami and the Jets.
Yeah, so I think that's where a lot of his progress will be made. But we won't get to see it. But yeah, for preseason, yeah, a quarter or so, or a few series if he comes out crazy.
Oh, somebody's missing a bet. That actually works with the Elton John song, Miami and the Jets. Oh, there's your line for tonight, John. That's and I ain't even thinking about it, but
Right.
As far as Jaden goes, look, in my opinion, if he doesn't practice, we're going to be starting the season. He's going to be getting similar reps in the regular season. If you want to just put a timeline on it, or a parallel line, whether he gets it in the preseason or during the regular season at this point, I don't think 2024 should prioritize 2024. And what I mean by that is everything we do this year should have a priority of how we enter 2025. So, in my opinion, he should get his. We should not risk, or we should not roll him in bubble wrap. I want to see him get reps in the preseason. I know I don't want him to get hurt, but God forbid he does get hurt. I would rather it happen in the preseason than in November, because in the preseason he's going to have 12 months to recover, and there's a lot of other things that go along with that. Whereas if we bubble wrap him and we're cautious with him, and he does end up getting hurt later in the regular season, then you push back 2025. And I don't want to risk 2025. I want him to get as many reps as possible. I want him to get as much experience as possible. And a lot of people, including Theismann, will say, well, the offensive line is a liability. Well, guess what? The offensive line is likely a liability on 20 of the 32 teams. There's probably only 10 or 12 teams that are quote unquote comfortable with their offensive line. So chances are he's going to have to deal with the liability at offensive line somewhere. So let's get him the opportunity to see that and be able to overcome it as soon as possible. That doesn't mean I want him to play 4 quarters. I want him to play with his offense. I want him to play with the first team. I'd like to see the first team get at least a combined 2 quarters between the first two games, whether that's 2 series in the first, whatever. But give me 25 pass attempts, give me 15 or 18 minutes of game time just so that he can be on the field with some real experience.
So just to throw it out there, CJ Stroud last year started all 3 preseason games for Houston.
Mm-hmm.
He had 20 pass attempts with 11 completions for a total of 89 yards in preseason.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that equates to for game time. I don't know whether that's a quarter, whether that's we're going to play you for 2 drives. I don't know how that broke out. And unfortunately, haven't been able to find that information. But my guess is Jaden Daniels probably gets a little bit more exposure than this, but probably not a lot.
I think what the challenge is, if the team gets the preseason and they're like, this guy knows the offense like the back of his hand, he's ready to go as much as a rookie can be, and we have total confidence in him, that's going to factor into like how much he plays.
Fair.
Versus,
true.
I mean, it's hard to know. It's all about what confidence do they have in the kid at that point. And so I think that's why it makes it hard to say what's the right approach and what's not the right approach.
Totally fair. All right, John, you had something else you wanted to throw out as we're winding this thing down, right?
Yeah, so we were going to throw out kind of a wild card, which is if you had to list like 3 players in 2024 who were critical to the team's success, who would those guys be? You don't have to give a lot of like why you think that way, but who are the guys that have to shine aside from quarterback? Because we all know that's going to be a huge factor. But what other players, whether they're rookies or veterans or free agent signings, that are going to be the most important to the team in terms of the total team success? I can start if you want. While you
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, go for it.
I think John Allen is a big one because
Mm-hmm.
John Allen had a pretty rough 2023. Some of that, I think he was hurt a little bit and banged up. I also think his attitude wasn't great, at some point. And I mean, he's pretty much said as much. But I also think, and he's one of the guys that's been the most effusive about, the Dan Quinn hiring and the change in kind of the vibe. He's been one of the guys that's talked a lot about that. So I really think John Allen could be what he does could be a huge impact. Jahan Dotson is my second guy because we really don't have a proven second wide receiver, and that's a little concerning when you have a rookie quarterback coming in. And I don't know who that guy is. I know, and I think we overinflate his rookie year. He had some really great plays in his rookie year, but it's not like he broke records. I mean, and I didn't look up the stats, but I know he didn't like catch a ton of passes his rookie season.
No, but he also missed 7 games.
He looked good when he played.
Yeah.
I don't think you can take his rookie season and say, yes, he's it. So I think this is a prove it year for him. And then the third guy, I kind of went wild card on this one, Brandon Coleman, because I do think they're going to run him out there as left tackle. not Cornelius Lucas. I think he'll beat him out, and I think he'll be the starter. And to what degree that's like, he makes us look like geniuses for drafting him as our starting left tackle versus maybe he's not a starting left tackle in the NFL. We'll have to see, but those are my three guys.
I'll go next. The first guy, I was gonna go Brandon Coleman, and I agree with you, but I'll pivot. I'm gonna say Tyler Biotish. I think a lot of what is going to dictate this offense is going to be the offensive line and how it comes together. And we have our questions at tackle. We think we're okay at guard, but if Biotish is the guy that's going to kind of bring that unit together, that could make or break the entirety of the season. If we have liabilities there, we saw it wasn't that long ago that Tyler Larson came in due to injury, and the team in the offensive line got markedly better just because our starting center went out. Another guy I'm going to put out there is, you said Allen, so I'll say Payne because I don't want to totally copy you, but I think it's fair is that the interior of that D line is going to be how the entirety of our defense goes. There's so much invested there that if that interior D line can be effective, and not only be effective, but be borderline dominant the way that we've hoped and expected, it changes everything behind them. So if Allen and Payne can be those guys, if you want to talk about who's critical to be the success of the defense, those two guys probably have more effect than anybody else does. And then the last guy, I guess I'll say, is I'm going to take a cop out here. It's too easy. Is Bobby Wagner. Bobby Wagner. Beyond Allen and Payne, our defense goes through him. And if those two can do something, and Bobby Wagner can just be an animal and hunt, that is a completely different dynamic of our defensive unit.
Yeah, that's good. What do you
Tony?
got?
Hit
All
it,
right.
man.
Yeah, you said a couple of guys I was going to say. So I'll go with a combination of Ertz and Sennett, so the tight end, because they always bail out and really help the quarterbacks, and especially with Jaden Daniels being a rookie, the tight end position could be a good safety valve. And then I'm also going to go with Frankie, I love you. So because Bobby Wagner's going to shore up the middle and get everyone aligned. So I think Luvu's just going to have free reign to wreak havoc and track down running backs and attack the quarterback. So I think that's going to be a big deal for us. And then lastly, whoever winds up being our kicker, because with the new kickoff rules, and then also I expect our defense to keep us competitive in games. So i.e., we'll probably be in more closer games, and we'll need to have our kicker.
Yeah.
All right, Bob, is there anybody left?
Yeah.
Yeah, there are actually a couple of people left, believe it or not. I'm gonna throw Cosme's name back out there. I think Cosme is integral to this offensive line being a success this year. He's arguably the most established talent on the offensive line right now. And if he regresses or, God forbid, gets hurt, the offensive line takes a massive step backwards. I think how he approaches the season and the way he plays is going to make him absolutely an integral part of that unit and perhaps the most important member of it. Outside of possibly Coleman. I mean, Coleman's got some big shoes to fill out there, right? You guys have cleaned up on defense, literally every person I could think of. So I will go with a semi-controversial pick, because I don't know that the defense is going to hinge on him being great, but this is a very big year for Jamin Davis. And this is a coaching staff. If anybody can get something out of Jamin Davis, something positive, something impactful, something game-changing out of Jamin Davis, it's this group of guys. If Quinn Witt and Ken Norton Jr. can't figure out how to use this kid, nobody in the NFL can figure out how to use this kid. And
Yeah.
so, and the thing is, if they do, he becomes an immediate impact player. He becomes an immediate threat with his athleticism. And the last guy I'm going to throw in there is Derek Forrest. This team is this defense. They've been very clear about the fact that this defense is going to be driven on turnovers. Derek Forrest proved himself to be something of a ball hawk late last season or early last season before he got hurt. If he can recover that form coming out of an injury and be that guy in a defense designed to turn the ball over with coaches that are proven to be able to create that type of an environment, he could do some, he could have an, a Pro Bowl kind of a season at that free safety position. So there you go. 3 guys. For the record, Tony, I thought about kicker. I also thought about throwing long snapper in there after our experience last year.
Oh man, yeah. Jeez.
I thought about throwing that name in there, but
True.
then I couldn't find his name fast enough, so I left it off. De'Ami Brown was on my list, John.
I think
I'm just glad that no one brought the punter up because
Tress Way, man, our team MVP.
That's kind of been our guy, right, for the last 3 or 4 seasons. Like, oh yeah, we have a great punter, man. It's gonna be really important when our drive stall. I
thought about bringing Tress Way up because he's already had a massive impact this off season, simply by the way he handled the whole jersey thing.
Yeah.
And I thought about throwing his name out there for that reason, not because of gameplay, right? But there you go.
I don't know about you guys, but when we start talking about the players we have on this defense, I just start getting all googly eyed and I get all warm.
Nobody even mentioned Jeremy Chin. Nobody mentioned.
I know we have so much
any
talent.
Defensive end. I mean,
And
you could make an argument.
I'm telling you, man.
You could make an argument that if we want to be successful at all, we need a double-digit sack season out of somebody as an edge rusher. Like, there's so many different ways you could go with this.
Mm-hmm.
Tress Way may have a sack the way we're going, man. I don't know. I don't know if that works, but I'm just telling you, this defense on paper, it looks pretty good, man. It looks pretty exciting.
It does. And if a couple of the young guys, and I'm thinking about Quan Martin and I'm thinking about Mike Sinestri and Emmanuel Forbes, if those 3 guys can, well, if Martin and Forbes can even remotely live up to the hype around them last year when they were drafted, and Sinestri turns out to be everything we think he might be, suddenly the secondary becomes a strength.
Oh, and by the way, Newton is out there.
Yes.
Oh yeah,
probably the best pick of the entire draft, who we won't see for a while. But I mean, oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. This could become a very scary unit. We could terrify some people by midseason.
The other thing but one thing that I hate to be a wet blanket. It's going to take time to come together because of how much new is there. You know what I mean? Like, these guys have to learn what it's like to be, who's going to be where, and they got to learn their tendencies and stuff like that. And when that starts to happen, if that starts to click, man, it's going to be, this could be.
It clicks right away.
I hope it does. I hope it does.
Talking about?
I just think there's a lot. I'm tempering my own expectations because it's,
I don't know.
Look, it's hard. It's hard to drop a rookie quarterback into any team. It's hard to drop a new defensive coordinator into any defense. This has been a complete overhaul. There is just so much new.
The good thing is the rest of the division has new everywhere too, so that'll help.
True.
I think the biggest thing for me, Derek, and it's twofold. The first thing is that we heard from Quinn early in the offseason that he didn't want these guys thinking too much. And what I heard in his words were, we feel like the last couple of years they've been asked to think too much.
Mhm.
We want them to simply be able to go do their jobs. And if they can figure out how to distill the defense down to the point that a guy like Jamin Davis knows exactly what he's supposed to do in any given situation and can simply react, this defense is going to be terrifying. The other thing is this defense has lacked legitimate on-field leadership since London Fletcher retired.
It's kind of
And
like you
I
guys
think
have
a
seen
lot
Coach.
of the thinking was, how the hell can I get out of Washington?
Right.
You're not wrong. You know, you're not wrong.
And I think that has changed. I think overnight that has changed. It's like,
yeah.
You guys have
Oh, yeah.
seen Coach Carter, right? Coach Carter, the movie with Samuel L. Jackson when he's the head coach, and like he gets in there and he just makes them run for practice and run and run and run. They go to their first game. They're, Coach, we didn't work on offense. He goes, y'all are good enough. Y'all just run. You're gonna win the game. You know what I mean? It's kind of that situation. You wonder if they get back to that and say, we're going to dumb this thing down. We're going to run 4 plays. Okay. It's either cover 2, it's a zone defense, whatever. Y'all are good enough. Just go out there, read and react. Don't think too much. So I'm curious if that's the way that it ends up being. All right,
fun
gents.
luck, man. Most exciting
Yep.
exciting off season in 20 years.
Yep. And we're less than 24 hours from the off season coming to a close and the preseason camp starting with the rookies reporting tomorrow. Benjamin St. Juste shared a video on Instagram about him fitting his helmet. So it looks like some of the guys are already in the facility getting their stuff together. So that's kind of cool. But before we sign off, of course, if you made it this far, please give us a like and share and a follow. Hook us up.
Subscribe
to the YouTube. Subscribe to all the audio platforms. We would love it. And absolutely, please feel free to come by BGObsession.com. Sign up, mix it up, have some fun. We enjoy ourselves a lot over
the
there.
best Washington Commanders fan site on the internet anywhere.
Absolutely. All right, boys. Well, with that, I will bid you guys adieu. It's been a pleasure. Much fun, and we'll be back next week. Hopefully talking about the vets reporting on the 23rd. Is that Tuesday the 23rd?
Okay.
And then our first full practice, I believe, will be Wednesday the 24th. So hopefully there's some stuff to talk about. All right, gentlemen.
Night, guys.